It was a quiet town, the kind of place where nothing ever really happened. But there was one street, Elder Lane, that people avoided after dark. The old house at the end of the street stood like a gnarled finger, its windows dark and empty, and its peeling paint whispering secrets to the wind. Megan, a newcomer to the town, had heard the stories. The locals spoke in hushed tones about the previous owners who had vanished without a trace. Despite the warnings, curiosity tugged at her. One chilly evening, armed with a flashlight and her phone, she decided to explore the infamous house. As she approached, the air grew still, and a chill ran down her spine. The front door hung ajar, creaking slightly as she nudged it open. The smell of mildew and decay filled her nostrils, but she pressed on, her heart pounding in her chest. The foyer was dark, the floorboards creaking beneath her weight. Shadows danced along the walls, flickering like old memories. She pulled out her flashlight, its beam slicing through the darkness, illuminating the remnants of a life once lived. A broken chair, a dusty table, and a faded photograph that had fallen to the floor. Megan picked it up. In it, a family smiled, 2 parents, 2 children. But something felt off. Their eyes seemed to follow her, filled with an unsettling emptiness. She shivered and dropped the photo, moving deeper into the house. As she walked through the living room, she noticed the wallpaper peeling back, revealing layers of grime beneath. The atmosphere grew heavier, and a sense of dread settled in her stomach. She heard a faint sound like a whisper, but when she turned to listen, silence enveloped her. "Just the wind," she told herself, but doubt crept in. She ascended the staircase, each step creaking ominously. At the top, a long hallway stretched out, with doors lining either side. She hesitated, the whispers growing louder, urging her to leave. Instead, she approached the first door on her left and turned the handle. It swung open with a groan. Inside, she found a bedroom untouched by time. The bed was neatly made, and the dresser held a few trinkets, hairbrushes, a faded diary. Curiosity piqued. She picked up the diary and opened it. The pages were filled with the frantic scrawl of a woman named Clara, detailing her life and fears. "They're watching us," the last entry read. "I can feel them in the walls. They want something." Megan's heart raced. The words were chilling. Just then she heard a loud thud from the hallway, followed by a low guttural sound that sent ice coursing through her veins. She dropped the diary and rushed to the door, but it slammed shut before she could reach it. Panic surged. She rattled the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers morphed into frantic murmurs, filling the room with a chorus of voices. "Help us," they seemed to plead. "We're trapped." Desperate, she turned back to the room and noticed something shimmering in the corner. A small mirror hung on the wall, its surface rippling like water. Mesmerized, she stepped closer, her breath fogging the glass. But instead of her reflection, she saw the family from the photograph. They were standing in the room, but it was different, filled with light, laughter, and life. Clara smiled, beckoning her closer. "Join us," she whispered, her voice sweet yet sinister. Megan staggered back, heart pounding. She turned to the door again, now pounding on it with all her might. "Let me out," she screamed, but the murmurs escalated into a cacophony, a haunting serenade of despair. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and she stumbled out into the hallway. The air felt electric, crackling with energy. But as she turned to flee, the door slammed shut behind her with a deafening thud. She ran down the hallway, the whispers trailing after her, each step heavier than the last. At the top of the stairs, she hesitated, glancing back. The mirror now reflected her own terrified face, but behind her, Clara and her family stood, eyes wide and dark, mouths moving as if chanting her name. "Megan! Megan!" She sprinted down the stairs, the whispers crescendoing into screams, urging her to stop, to come back. She burst through the front door and stumbled out into the night, the cool air hitting her like a wave. But as she reached the sidewalk, she turned back, heart racing. The house loomed dark and silent once more. The whispers faded, replaced by the echo of her own heavy breathing. Days turned into weeks, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Sometimes at night, she could swear she heard faint whispers calling her name, and she'd wake up in a cold sweat, staring into the darkness of her own room. One evening, she gathered her courage and decided to return to Elder Lane. Armed with a friend, Sarah, they approached the house together. As they neared the entrance, Megan felt a knot of dread tighten in her chest. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, glancing at the dilapidated structure. "Yeah," Megan said, trying to sound brave. "I just need to know what happened." As they stepped inside, the familiar smell of decay enveloped them. The house felt different this time. Alive, pulsating with an unseen energy. Shadows flitted at the edges of her vision, and the whispers began anew, urging them deeper. Suddenly, Sarah stopped, staring at the mirror in the bedroom. "Megan, look," she said, pointing. The mirror shimmered and rippled, reflecting not their own images but the family once again. The dark eyes focused intently on them. Days turned into weeks, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Sometimes at night, she could swear she heard faint whispers calling her name, and she'd wake up in a cold sweat, staring into the darkness of her own room. One evening, she gathered her courage and decided to return to Elder Lane. Armed with a friend, Sarah, they approached the house together. As they neared the entrance, Megan felt a knot of dread tighten in her chest. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, glancing at the dilapidated structure. "Yeah," Megan said, trying to sound brave. "I just need to know what happened." As they stepped inside, the familiar smell of decay enveloped them. The house felt different this time. Alive, pulsating with an unseen energy. Shadows flitted at the edges of her vision, and the whispers began anew, urging them deeper. Suddenly, Sarah stopped, staring at the mirror in the bedroom. "Megan, look," she said, pointing. The mirror shimmered and rippled, reflecting not their own images but the family once again. The dark eyes focused intently on them. "Megan, we need to leave," Sarah urged, but it was too late. The door slammed shut, trapping them inside. The whispers rose in a frantic pitch, the family in the mirror now grinning, their mouths moving faster, chanting in a language Megan couldn't understand. The air grew thick, and Megan felt an overwhelming pull toward the mirror. "Join us!" Clara's voice rang clear, echoing through the room. Megan screamed, but it felt as if the walls were closing in. The mirror's surface swirled, and before she knew it, she was standing before it, drawn in like a moth to a flame. And as the world around her blurred, she realized she was not just a visitor anymore. She was part of the house, part of its dark history, its endless whispers now her own. The house on Elder Lane still stands, waiting for its next curious soul. And those who dare to enter will find themselves trapped within its walls, forever part of the haunting tale that echoes through the night. In the quaint town of Maplewood, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, stood an old toy store called Evelyn's Curiosities. It was a relic from a bygone era, filled with dusty shelves and toys from decades past. Among its treasures was a dusty corner dedicated to dolls. They sat on the shelves, each one with a story, but one doll drew the most attention. A porcelain figure with hauntingly beautiful blue eyes and a frilly white dress, yet a sinister air about her. Lila, a 10-year-old girl with an insatiable curiosity, was captivated by the doll whenever she visited the store with her mother. "Mom, can we take her home?" she begged one afternoon. But her mother always shook her head, warning her that the doll had a reputation for being unusual. "Some say she's cursed," the shopkeeper, Miss Evelyn, would whisper. "She's been here longer than I can remember. Many who've taken her home have returned her, saying she brings bad luck." Despite the warnings, Lila's fascination only grew. On her birthday, her mother finally relented, and they brought the doll home. As Lila cradled it in her arms, she felt an odd chill but brushed it aside. After all, it was her birthday. That night, Lila placed the doll on her nightstand, where it sat facing her as she drifted off to sleep. The room was quiet, save for the soft creaking of the old house settling. Hours later, Lila awoke to a soft giggle. Confused, she glanced at the doll. Its expression seemed to have changed, the smile now wider, more sinister. "Just my imagination," she muttered and turned back to sleep. The next day, strange things began to happen. Lila found her toys rearranged in peculiar patterns, her building blocks stacked in strange shapes, and her stuffed animals lined up as if having a meeting. Each time, she shrugged it off as her own forgetfulness, but a seed of unease planted itself in her mind. One evening, Lila awoke to find the doll missing from her nightstand. Panic set in as she searched her room, calling out for it. Finally, she spotted it at the end of the hallway, standing eerily still in front of the bathroom door. Its blue eyes seemed to glint in the dim light. "Why are you here?" she whispered, her voice trembling. But the doll remained silent, its porcelain face unyielding. That night, Lila tossed and turned, plagued by dreams of shadowy figures and whispers echoing in her ears. Each time she awoke, the doll was in a different place, sitting at the foot of her bed, perched on the windowsill, and once even staring at her from the mirror. "Mom!" Lila cried out, shaking her mother awake one morning. "The doll is moving." Her mother, weary from sleepless nights, brushed it off as a child's imagination. "It's just a doll, honey. It can't move. You're probably just dreaming." But Lila knew what she had seen. Determined to uncover the truth, she began to research the doll. She discovered that it had once belonged to a girl named Amelia, who had mysteriously vanished from her home over a century ago. Legend had it that the doll had been cursed, and anyone who possessed it would suffer misfortune until they returned it to its rightful place. Feeling a mix of dread and determination, Lila decided she needed to return the doll to Evelyn's curiosities. But the thought of facing the doll's piercing gaze made her stomach churn. She gathered her courage and slipped the doll into a bag, her heart racing as she made her way to the store. As she approached the store, a storm brewed overhead, dark clouds rolling in as if reflecting her inner turmoil. When she finally arrived, she pushed the door open, a bell tinkling softly. Miss Evelyn looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. "You're back," she said, her voice a mixture of relief and concern. "I take it you've had an experience?" Lila nodded, unable to find the words. She placed the doll on the counter, and as soon as it left her hands, a gust of wind swept through the store, causing the lights to flicker. The doll's eyes seemed to glisten, as if aware of its surroundings. "Many have tried to return her," Miss Evelyn said solemnly, "but she doesn't give up her hold easily." Suddenly, the lights went out completely, plunging the store into darkness. Lila felt a cold breeze brush past her, and she heard the faint sound of giggling echoing through the shelves. "Get out!" Lila shouted, panic surging within her. But the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. "Stay close to me," Miss Evelyn urged, grabbing Lila's hand. Together, they searched for a way out as shadows twisted around them. The whispers grew louder, filling the air with a sense of dread. Help us," they called. In the midst of the chaos, Lila remembered a story she had read. How the doll could be freed only if someone willingly took its place. Heart racing, she turned to Miss Evelyn. "We need to find a way to appease it." As they searched frantically, Lila spotted a small wooden box on the floor, partially hidden beneath a shelf. She opened it, revealing a collection of old trinkets, each one labeled with a name. The last item in the box was a locket, inscribed with the name, Amelia. "This must be hers," Lila exclaimed, realizing it might be the key to breaking the curse. In that moment, the whispers transformed into a cacophony of wails, and the doll's blue eyes glowed ominously. "You must give," it echoed, its voice layered with the cries of countless souls. With trembling hands, Lila took the locket and held it out toward the doll. "I give you this," she shouted. "Please let us go." For a heartbeat, silence enveloped the room. Then the doll's expression softened, and the shadows began to recede. The air grew still, and the door creaked open, revealing the stormy night outside. Lila and Miss Evelyn bolted for the exit, escaping just as the lights flickered back on. Outside, the storm began to dissipate, the clouds parting to reveal a bright moon. "Thank you," Miss Evelyn breathed, looking down at the locket in Lila's hands. "You did what many couldn't. You freed her." As they walked away from the store, Lila felt a weight lift from her chest. The whispers faded into the night, and the eerie presence of the doll finally vanished. But that night, as Lila lay in bed, she felt a lingering chill. She glanced at her nightstand, half expecting to see the doll once more, and in the silence she swore she could hear a faint giggle, drifting through the darkness, echoing with a promise that some stories never truly end. It was a chilly autumn evening when Sarah received a text from her best friend Jenna. They had been inseparable since childhood, sharing everything from secrets to dreams. But lately, Jenna had been distant, often disappearing for days without explanation. When Sarah's phone buzzed, she felt a rush of relief. "Hey, I need to talk. Can you meet me at the old park?" The old park was a place they had frequented as kids, a place filled with laughter and memories. But it had fallen into disrepair, long abandoned and overgrown. As Sarah made her way there, unease settled in her stomach. Something felt off. When she arrived, the park was eerily silent. The rusted swings creaked in the wind, and the trees whispered ominously, their branches swaying like skeletal fingers. Sarah scanned the area, calling out, "Jenna, are you here?" "Over here," came a faint voice from the shadows of the old pavilion. Jenna emerged, looking pale and disheveled, as if she hadn't slept in days. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't know who else to turn to." "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, her heart racing with worry. Jenna's eyes darted around as if she were being watched. "I've been experiencing things," Jenna confessed, her gaze dropping to the ground. "Strange things. I think something's following me." "Following you?" Sarah repeated, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" Jenna took a deep breath. "I keep seeing this figure in the corners of my vision. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but then it started showing up in my dreams. And now I see it when I'm awake. It's always watching." A chill crept down Sarah's spine. "Have you told anyone else?" "No. I'm scared they won't believe me, but it feels so real. I've started getting these messages too, like it knows things about me." She pulled out her phone, showing Sarah a series of texts that were both chilling and cryptic. "I see you. You can't escape. It's time to pay." Sarah's heart raced. "Jenna, this is serious. You need to report this." "I can't," Jenna whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. "I can't even explain it. It feels like I'm losing control of my own mind." "Let's get out of here," Sarah suggested, trying to keep her voice steady. But just as she turned to leave, a sudden gust of wind swept through the park, carrying a faint whisper that sent shivers down her spine. "Stay." Sarah looked back at Jenna, whose face had gone pale. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Jenna asked, her eyes wide with fear. "Someone said stay." Jenna shook her head, backing away. "We need to go. Now." They turned to leave, but the path to the exit felt longer, as if the trees were closing in around them. Panic surged in Sarah's chest. "Jenna, hurry." As they dashed toward the exit, Sarah's phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen and froze. "You can't run from me." "Jenna, it's texting me now," she exclaimed. But before she could show her friend, another message appeared. "I'm closer than you think. Let's just keep moving," Jenna urged, pulling on Sarah's arm. They broke into a sprint, hearts pounding in their chests. Just as they reached the edge of the park, Jenna stopped abruptly, staring into the trees. "It's there," she gasped, pointing into the shadows. "Where?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. "I don't know, but I can feel it." Jenna's breath came in quick bursts as she turned to Sarah, eyes wild. "We have to leave. It's not safe." They burst through the park's gates, gasping for breath. The world outside felt brighter, but a lingering dread hung in the air. "What do we do now?" Sarah asked, trying to catch her breath. "I don't know," Jenna admitted, shaking. "But I can't go home. I feel like it's waiting for me." "Come stay at my place," Sarah offered. "We'll figure this out together." They returned to Sarah's house, locking the doors and drawing the curtains tight. They sat on the couch, surrounded by the familiar comfort of home, but the tension in the air was palpable. As night fell, Sarah's phone buzzed again. She hesitated, her heart racing. "It's another message," she whispered, dread pooling in her stomach. "You can't hide from me." Jenna clutched Sarah's arm. "We need to turn off our phones," she urged. "I don't want to see any more of these." They powered down their devices and tried to distract themselves with a movie. But every creak of the house made them jump. Every shadow felt alive. Hours passed, and exhaustion began to weigh on them. They decided to try and sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. At around 2 a.m., Sarah heard a soft tapping sound. She sat up, heart pounding. "Jenna, do you hear that?" "Yes," Jenna whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's coming from the window." They both stared at the window, the tapping growing more persistent. "What is it?" Jenna breathed. "I don't know. Should we check?" Sarah replied, her voice trembling. Jenna nodded hesitantly. They tiptoed to the window, peering outside into the darkness. Nothing seemed amiss, just the trees swaying in the night. Suddenly, Sarah's phone buzzed again, breaking the tense silence. She grabbed it, but before she could unlock the screen, Jenna gasped. "It's behind you," she shrieked. Sarah whipped around, heart racing, but there was nothing there. The room felt suffocating, shadows dancing in the corners. "Jenna, we need to get out of here," Sarah shouted, panic surging through her. They bolted toward the front door, but it wouldn't budge. "It's locked," Sarah cried, her hands trembling. "Try the back door," Jenna yelled, fear lacing her voice. They dashed to the kitchen, fumbling with the back door, but it was stuck tight. The tapping sound intensified, echoing through the house now, a sinister rhythm. "It's here," Jenna screamed. Sarah felt her heart drop. "We need to call for help," she shouted. But as she turned back to her phone, the screen lit up with another message. "I'm inside." In a frantic rush, they turned to the living room, scanning for an escape. The shadows deepened, and a dark figure began to materialize in the corner of the room. It was tall and thin, its features indistinct but menacing. "Run!" Sarah screamed, shoving Jenna toward the hallway. They bolted toward the front door again, but as they reached for the handle, it swung open on its own, revealing the outside world. They didn't hesitate. They dashed out into the night, sprinting away from the house and into the safety of the streetlights. The chilling laughter echoed behind them, mingling with the wind. "Where do we go?" Jenna panted, glancing back. "Anywhere but here," Sarah shouted. They ran until their legs burned, not stopping until they reached the police station at the edge of town. Breathless and terrified, they stumbled inside, explaining the haunting messages and the figure in Sarah's house. The officers exchanged concerned glances, and one of them, a seasoned detective, leaned closer. "We've had reports of something similar," he said, voice low. "It's been happening to others in the area. People who have received strange messages, followed by incidents." "Incidents?" Jenna asked, her voice trembling. "Disappearances. Those who see the figure don't often come back." Panic set in as they realized the gravity of their situation. They were not just facing a ghostly figure. They were dealing with something sinister, something that sought to claim them. "What can we do?" Sarah asked, desperation seeping into her voice. The detective frowned. "We can help you, but you need to tell us everything. Where did this all start?" As they recounted the events leading to their visit to the park, the detective listened intently. But when they mentioned the doll and Jenna's earlier experiences, his expression darkened. "Leave the park behind," he said firmly. "And whatever you do, don't let it follow you." Exhausted and terrified, they agreed to stay at the station for the night. But as they settled into the waiting area, Jenna's phone buzzed again. It was a message from an unknown number. "I'm still watching." The room fell silent, the weight of fear crashing down around them. The detective's face went pale as he read the message. "We need to move," he said urgently, ushering them into a secure area. As they huddled together, the reality of their situation sank in. They were not just fighting a haunting. They were in the middle of a sinister game, and they were the prey. Hours passed and the sun began to rise, casting light on their terror-stricken faces. But as the dawn broke, they knew that the nightmare was far from over. Whatever had begun in that park was just the start, and the last message was yet to come. Hope you enjoyed this tale. If you want more stories or different themes, just let me know.